This here is the OBSBOT Tiny 2. This is a PTZ camera with AI tracking, all kinds of cool, crazy features in an app. You name it, awesome. Only one problem. It's $329. So they brought you the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. Here's the Lite. Here's the OBSBOT Tiny 2. Almost look the same, don't they? So how did they get this down to $179 price tag in the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite? We'll talk about it in today's episode of Level Up. Okay, so here we go. This is the OBSBOT Tiny 2. This is the $329 webcam that we're starting with. All the auto features are turned on in the app. So we have HDR is turned on, autofocus is on, autofocus for the face, not global. Auto exposure is turned on, and auto white balance is turned on. So this is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 operating on its own with the auto features turned on. And this is the image that you're getting. Now, let's switch over to the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. This is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. They are side by side. And as the OBSBOT Tiny 2 was, as far as the image, auto features are turned on. One of the things I noticed already between the two, it's just a tighter focus. It's not the same field of view. It's a little tighter, a little more compact. Now, I've been using this OBSBOT Tiny 2 for my live streams on another YouTube channel that I do, Coffee at the Cross, prayer request stream, things like that. I've been using that live stream in particular with all 4 OBSBOT webcams. I wanted to see which one I truly did like the best. So I had the OBSBOT Tail Air pointed at me. I had the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite pointed at my father-in-law. I had the OBSBOT Tiny 2 pointed at my mother-in-law. And then I had the OBSBOT Meet 4K pointed at my wife. And I just wanted them all side by side in the exact same room to see which one had more color accuracy, which one had more sharpness. And I'm just going to say that the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, to me, was my favorite image out of the 4. I'm just going to say, a little disappointed that the OBSBOT Tail Air, which is was the most expensive camera at $500, was the image that was the most cloudiest, the most haziest in its auto features. So, you know, that camera is more $500 for the features. It's another one of those little things where just because it's cheaper, just because it's not as expensive as another model doesn't always mean it's better for you. So let's go ahead and do a side-by-side comparison of the two. So on your screen on the left, I'm pointing at my left, but it looks like the right. So I'm just not even going to try pointing. But on the left of your screen is the OBSBOT Tiny 2. The one on the right is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. Just, it's not as hazy on the OBSBOT Tiny 2. It's a tighter frame, and the blacks are deeper and a little more rich. And again, both of them are set on auto, okay? So I'm not doing anything. These are what the cameras are able to pull out of the same room in the same environment, but just the color and the darkness and the lighting is much more warm and welcoming on the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. And again, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 at $329 has more features and can do a few more things. But for me, when I do my live streams, I just want to plug it in. I want it to point at me. I want good lighting. I just want it to look nice. I want it tighter on me so there's not so much of the room that I have to cut out. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 does that. And I will say this, as I'm doing my hand gestures too, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 is more sensitive to those movements. As I was just doing that hand gesture thing right now, it received my hand signal and disconnected the auto tracking, where the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is still tracking me. So as you're talking and you're handsy like me, it's not going to be as sensitive to those hand gestures as the OBSBOT Tiny 2 was. Another improvement at a cheaper price. So let's go over some features that still remain the same between the two cameras. They both still recognize and operate, and you can control them through hand gestures. So by putting my right hand up, I can deactivate the auto tracking on both. So now you see it's not following me around the room. Putting my hand back up activates the AI tracking. And now both cameras are following me. I will say too that the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, which is the one on the right, has more smooth and more natural tracking. It's slow, it's gentle, where the one on the left is more active. When I've used AI tracking on the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, see how it's so subtle, and even the movements, it's just smidgy. The Tiny 2 Lite is more for me than the OBSBOT Tiny 2. And I love the Tiny 2. It was my favorite webcam. All right, so now I've slapped the OBSBOT Center app so you guys can see what I'm doing. Number 1 in here is the OBSBOT Tiny 2, and number 2 up here is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. So circling to 1, as you guys see throughout this whole thing, the gesture controls have been on. Going to the console, they both have standard normal tracking between the two. And they've both, oh, here we go. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 was zoomed in. Oh, that's because of the dynamic zoom I was doing earlier. So again, as you can see, the field of view is bigger than it is on the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. So let's run through the two features so you can see which one carried over to the Tiny 2 Lite at 179 and which ones didn't. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 has upper body, close-up, headless, and lower body settings. So if I click upper body, so if I zoom out, no matter where I go, it's going to keep that upper body in the shot. If I want to do close-up, clicking the close-up. Now if I go far out, it's going to keep me tighter in the shot. Headless, it will track you. Want to be able to hold things up on your desk and just, you know, hey, take a look at this webcam. You don't want your head to be in the frame. It will track you, but keep your head out of the frame. In lower body, it's just going to do your legs and say, hey, hey, hey. Let's see how many of those transferred over to the Tiny 2. So we've lost some. So here we have the standard motion, normal tracking, but now all we have is upper body and close-up. We've lost the faceless tracking and we've lost the lower body tracking. Fine by me. Never used them. It's kind of like cable and TV. You know, you pay a whole bunch of stuff for a whole bunch of channels you don't watch. What can I shave off to get my price down? These would have been some of the features that I would have shaved off to get that price down. So we went from headless lower body being available to just upper body close-up. So what else do we have? We have AI mode. So we have desk mode, whiteboard mode, hand tracking, and group tracking. In the Tiny 2, we just have group tracking. So you've lost the whiteboard mode, the desktop mode. So those are some of the things that didn't carry over in order to get that price down. We still have the 3 presets in the Tiny 2 Lite, whereas the Tiny 2, we still have the 3 presets. They both still have the gimbal, wide, medium, narrow, going over to the Tiny 2. The gimbal, okay, just to kind of give you an idea, gimbal operates where you want to do with the camera for both of them. That's its performance on the gimbal right there. AI tracking will bring it right back. Going to the Tiny 2 at 329. The Tiny 2 is a little more fast and herky-jerky, a little more faster response time. I think a little bit. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe about the same. There we go. On the image tab, what do we have for the Tiny 2 at 329? We've got HDR, autofocus mode for face and global. Let's go over to the Tiny 2. Same thing, HDR, autofocus, global and face. Auto exposure, on or off, global and face auto exposure. So what that means is, do you want the auto exposure to focus mainly on the face or everything in your shot? I'd like to have it on my face, but if you want to do global, you click that and it auto exposures the entire room, not just your face. Let's see here. Going back to the Tiny 2, if we go to global for auto exposure, let's see how that does. Okay, going back to the Tiny 2, global and face. So I think right there, let's turn that off and on. Let's dial this back in. Auto exposure, global. So we can see that the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite struggles a little bit more in that global auto exposure. But when we put it back on the face, turning that back off and on, let's activate it. Okay, going back to the Tiny 2. So there you go. Those are the differences between the two for auto exposure. What do we also have? Auto white balance. Right now it's set to auto on the Tiny 2. If we turn it off and set it to 5400K, let's go to the Tiny 2 Lite. Turn that off. Let's turn that to 5400K. And let's see the difference between the two with auto exposure turned off. I actually prefer the Tiny 2 Lite now. Auto exposure is turned off. The Tiny 2 on the left is at 500 ISO. The Tiny 2 Lite is also at 500 ISO on the right. I'm just going to say if I were doing a live stream, I would pick the Tiny 2 Lite just because it's not as much focus on and emphasis on the background, more of me and less detail and just more warmer, just a little more warmer, a little more inviting overall. Image on the Tiny 2 Lite is 50, 50, 50, 50, 50 right down the line. OBSBOT Tiny 2, 50, 50, 50 right down the line. So I make like minute adjustments to contrast and saturation. So usually I kind of bump up the contrast a little bit, bump up the saturation just a little bit. Sharpness, I bump this up quite a bit. I like a sharper, cleaner image. So with the Tiny 2, let's bump this up to 65. Okay. I've had this up as much as 72 before when I was trying to like really show detail with a video review. So we'll just say 72 right there. So 52, 52, 72. That's the Tiny 2. We getting confused yet? It's a struggle for me. All right, so let's bump this up to 52, 52, and sharpness up to 72 and see what we get of the two side by side. Which image do you like better? Tiny 2 or the Tiny 2 Lite? This is auto features turned off, but just customizing. And I've got them at the same numbers, the same levels. 500 ISO, 5400K for white balance, 52 contrast, 52 saturation, 72 for sharpness, hue left alone. Which one you think is good so far? 329 or 179? I don't know why I'm pointing. I give up. Anyways, the one on the left or the one on the right? Let's go over to the Tiny 2 and go to the More tab. What do we have in here? We have device sleep, auto sleep, sleep time. Does that carry over to the Tiny 2 Lite? Device sleep, auto sleep, sleep time. Yep, sleep background is in there, sleep background flip. So they both still have that. Which one just did that? All right, so that was the other complaint I've had so far on the OBSBOT Tiny 2. You can see that I've got the hand gestures for turning on and off the AI tracking. When I hold my hand up, the OBSBOT Tiny 2, even though I've got the locked target, basically that hand gesture up for turning that on and off, you can see that it's turned off, and yet the OBSBOT Tiny 2 stopped tracking me when I put my hand up. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is still behaving and doing as it's told. So they're both tracking me now. Hand up to turn it off, even though this should not work. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 is not listening. Basically, it turned off when it's not supposed to. Hand gestures. So again, you can see on the screen, number one being Tiny 2. This is not activated, so it should not work, but it did. Voice control with the Tiny 2. That's another feature in here that the Tiny 2 gives you at 329. You can tell it high Tiny, it'll wake up. Sleep Tiny, it'll turn off. Track me, it will track you. Unlock me, which is that hand gesture to track you, not track you. Zoom in closer, zoom out further, zoom factor, position 1, 2, or 3. So you can toggle between your presets, all by voice commands. The Tiny 2 Lite does not have that. Okay, so that's something else that you lost. I'll be honest with you, never used the voice control for the Tiny 2. So it's a feature that I lost that I never used. Thank you. Bring that price down. Audio stays the same. So let's go ahead and do an audio test of the two. It's the same microphone from what I understand. So let's just do a quick audio test. So audio test, you are now listening to me on the Tiny 2 built-in microphone. The Tiny 2 at 329. This is what it sounds like. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. He puts pineapple in his pizza. Why am I doing a plosive test for a webcam mic that's like 3 feet away? We'll just call it a siblings test. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers and he puts pineapple on his pizza. So the S's. Do you hear that? All right. Now this is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite microphone. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. He puts pineapple on his pizza. No need for a plosive test, but this is a siblings test, and it's just habit. So there you go. He puts pineapple. He puts pineapples on his. I gotta start over. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. He puts pineapple on his pizza. There's the siblings, the S's. There you go. Tell me what you think. Was there a difference? No difference. Now, one of the things you noticed, there's no filters on that one. So I had my AC on in the room. How much of the AC did show up? You probably hear a little bit more of an airy sound in there. Running it back through, this is the Tiny 2 Lite now with filters and OBS. This is the noise suppression turned on and the compression turned on. So the default compression in OBS is 10:1. I dropped that back down to 2:1. And again, noise suppression, so the air conditioner is still running. This is how much of that noise air conditioner it's able to drop out if you want to use these microphones for live streaming in OBS with ACs in the room. Just want to throw that in there. And this is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 microphone. Same thing. The filters of noise suppression and compression have been changed. Activated the noise suppression. Compression is set 2:1 in OBS. In case you wanted to use these microphones, no other setup for your live streams. This is what it sounds like with those filters on it. So now we switch over to the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, AI-powered webcam, PTZ, 4K. Still get 4K, 30 frames per second. So here we go. Auto tracking with auto zoom. Preset modes for presetting PTZ positions and other parameters. UHD resolutions of up to 4K, 30 frames per second. You can also stream in 1080p, 60 frames per second for the live streamers out there. Optimized body part trackability. Dual omnidirectional microphone with adjustable noise cancellation. So as you look down here, it says superior clarity. Priority is always on clarity with a 1/2" CMOS sensor and resolutions up to 4K, 30 frames per second. Tiny 2 Lite delivers crystal clear frames at unbeatable prices. So again, you can put it on a tripod, do all kinds of cool stuff. Light design with built-in stand. So the stand is built in. You're not going to have to worry about losing that, which I've done with the OBSBOT Tiny 2 more than one occasion. And it is lighter. It's not that heavier material. Effortless control with Stream Deck. So it is compatible with the Stream Deck. At least it will be. That's their intentions. It's not there yet, but they want to be able to make sure that you could operate all of these functions on your Stream Deck. That is so cool. Let's do our autofocus performance test. All right, there you go. That's all the tests. I've been using this now for almost 2 months behind the scenes, helping OBSBOT. They sent it to me just to kind of do some feedback as I was using it, things that it would do that I didn't like, things that I did like, problems that I was having with it over the last 2 months. They kept asking me week after week, what's some feedback? What's some feedback? You know, tell us some things that you don't like. What are some of the things that we can improve on? Some glitches. And I was silent because it didn't have any. Like the only thing that I didn't like about it was it seemed to be very sensitive to the hand gestures when I was moving around. So if you like to talk like this and you put your hand across, it zoomed. See how that was the only negative thing that I've encountered with this one so far. So if you use that little L signal as you're talking, and it's happened a couple of times during our live stream where I had the Tiny 2 Lite pointed at someone else. The one thing that kept happening is when they would just kind of point and talk and just do this naturally, you can see how the hand gestures, the zooming in and the zooming out, it's very sensitive for that, where you see the Tiny 2 is not doing that. So the Tiny 2, you have to be more intentional and focused, where the Tiny 2 Lite, it's very hyper. And I've had to get up from my seat, adjust their zoom to get it back out. And one of the things that I've had to do with it is go into the app and go to gesture controls and turn the gesture controls off. So again, I just don't use gesture controls because when I'm live streaming, I want my camera to be locked in. I don't want to have to worry about it. I'm handsy. I don't want my hands doing all kinds of funky stuff to my shot. I would turn the gesture controls off, and now I can do this, and now see how it's not doing it. Okay, so the gesture controls in the OBSBOT Tiny 2 are... See, so the OBSBOT Tiny 2 for gesture controls, you got to be really intentional with it for the zoom in and zoom out, which is cool, which means you can't accidentally trigger it. But when you do want to use those gesture controls, you can't keep talking during your live stream. You have to pause. So you have to do this. So again, there's pros and cons to this sensitivity, just depending on what you want out of your webcam. If you want to be able to be on your live stream and just nonchalant hand gestures to make your camera do what you want it to do, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, gotcha. If you want to be able to talk and be handsy and it not accidentally trigger a hand gesture, you want to lock it down and be a little more strict, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 is the answer for you. So it's more of a user preference between the two on what you want out of it. Me personally, I'm a little too handsy and it always gets me in trouble. So the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is better for me because, I mean, just watching this whole thing as I'm talking, my hands are everywhere. Okay, so up until this point, I have been doing this video in 1080p, 60 frames per second, because if you were doing live streaming, you would use 1080p resolution because a lot of software programs, a lot of streaming services only do 1080p. The A10 Mini does 1080p. Facebook is 720. Twitch, I think, is 720, maybe 1080. I don't know if they're quite there yet. However, when it comes to pre-recording videos to upload to YouTube, that's when you really want to use 4K. So now that the comparison is done, let's just see what this looks like when we switch the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite to 4K 30 frames per second. All right, so now we have just switched over to 4K 30 frames per second, and this is what the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite looks like at $179. So if you want an even sharper, crisper, more defined image for your YouTube videos, this is what you're going to get. So now that you're looking at the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite with its full potential, 4K, 30 frames per second, let's go ahead and go over my evaluation of the two webcams and who I thought come out on top. I'm just going to look at my notes down here from time to time so I don't miss anything. I'm going to try and land this plane and land it quick. So here we go. When it comes to colors, I give this edge to the Tiny 2 Lite. I think that there was more depth and more warmth to the colors. It was less towards that 5600K, more towards that 5200K feeling, a little more saturation with the palette wood behind me. The colors were a little deeper for like the Rode WS14 pop filters. I left those up there so you can kind of give something to look at from both cameras. Just, I wanted to change it up. I wanted lots of blacks and also wanted lots of colors and also that flesh tone and palette wood tone in the back. I think those are really good tells for where a camera is as far as the depth in colors. And I thought that the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite did a much better job of that. When it comes to blacks, I think it's tied. They both win for different reasons. If you like depth of color for the blacks, I think the OBSBOT Tiny 2 was better. Like you could see more wrinkles, you could see more detail in the blacks, you could see the stitching on my hat. There was just a whole lot more detail within the black on the OBSBOT Tiny 2. However, if you like the deeper blacks and just this like live streaming, toned down, richer look, you don't want all that detail, you don't want it so bright, you want to calm it down a little bit, relax the mood. This is a deeper black and it's darker and richer tones. Me, I like these blacks better for my live stream. Now, if I was doing like a sales call, Zoom calls, things like that, things for work where I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to show something in detail in all the colors, I want detail to kind of pierce through the colors so you can see stitching and things like that. If you're selling clothes, you name it. Everybody's doing something different on YouTube. I think that's where the OBSBOT Tiny 2 takes the lead. I think they both win for different reasons, so that's something that you're going to have to decide which one is more important to you. Detail within the blacks or just a deeper, darker, richer black with less detail within it. Tracking, I give it to the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite. They both track equally as well as far as keeping hold of the target once they've acquired it. However, I did notice the hand gestures. Even when I turned the hand gestures off in the software, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 still had a tendency to recognize that hand signal and misbehave and start listening to those commands when the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite behaved. If I turned the hand gestures off, it didn't matter what I did with my hands, and I'm a handsy guy when I'm talking, it stayed off. It didn't activate AI tracking. Overall features, the edge goes to the OBSBOT Tiny 2, obviously, because they left all the features in there. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is where they took out some of the less used features to get the price down. Now, when it comes to the microphones, I give the edge to the OBSBOT Tiny 2, the $329 model, simply because I felt like the noise rejection, the noise suppression in here with my air conditioner on was better. I feel like with the OBSBOT Tiny 2, that might have been something where they kind of pulled back a little bit as far as the quality and strength of the microphone with noise suppression to get that price down. Autofocus, hands down, no contest. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite was the winner. I was amazed when I was holding up that Diet Mountain Dew bottle, how quickly and how immediate it focused in on that bottle where the OBSBOT Tiny 2, which is known for its awesome autofocus, especially when compared to the Insta360 PTZ camera. It blew that one away. The Lite blew away the OBSBOT Tiny 2. It was even faster. It was able to grab onto the bottle, and I just felt like whenever I would hold it up in position to make sure it was in the right spot, before I could even look at my monitor to make sure it was in focus, it was already there. I never got to actually see it let go of my face and grab onto the bottle. It was that quick. It had already done it before I could physically look at my monitor. Auto features goes to the Tiny 2. There were times where the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite and auto features, I felt like it was a little too washed out in my face. When I disengage auto features, I think the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite gives me a better picture just with minute changes than the OBSBOT Tiny 2 gave me. And that's $329. All right, so there you go. Wrapping this up, landing the plane. Is the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite worth the price? Yes. Do I think it's a steal at $179? Absolutely. Because while they did get rid of some of the features in the OBSBOT Tiny 2, which is $329, they got rid of all the ones that I never used. So I'm able to get everything that I loved about the OBSBOT Tiny 2 and used in this one at almost half the price. And it performs better at the things I need it to actually perform in and gives me a better image that's more suited to what I like out of my video than the OBSBOT Tiny 2 did. So absolutely love it. This is now my, just straight up telling you, this is my go-to live stream webcam for my level up on Friday nights. It's what I'm going to be using moving forward. It's also the camera that I've been using in my live stream for Coffee at the Cross on my other YouTube channel. Been using that for 2 months now, and I just think whenever I use multiple webcams in that one, it's by far and away the best image of the four, and that includes a $500 OBSBOT Tail Air. That includes the OBSBOT Tiny 2 at $329. It also included the OBSBOT Meet 4K. That's $149, but it doesn't have the PTZ tracking. I would definitely recommend this. This is my favorite webcam now, #1 on my list as far as just overall what you get, price tag, factoring everything together. There are better deals out there, cheaper deals where you can get a video that's going to be more than okay at a cheaper price, absolutely. But for me, the one that just checks every box so well: price, performance, build quality, usability, reliability, execution, all of it, the colors. This one hits every box for me, and I love it at $179. Yeah, that's it. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button and the notification bell so you guys stay notified when future content goes up, because it is a-coming. And until I see you guys the next one, I would really appreciate you become a member. Just saying, if you'd love to support the channel, just food for thought there. Anyways, I appreciate the members. I love the subscribers. I love all you guys. Thank you for watching. And if you haven't watched this, I don't know what to say, because how could you be watching this without watching this? But anyways, I'm going to go now. Until I see you guys in the next video. That was bad. Better. I'm out.